Good morning. As the jets fly around the world, we prepare to start our show.
There go the days of our lives.
It's the rattly sound. There's a little tag on this tin toy that says, "For collectors, not for children." And the kid in me says, "Aw." Okay, but that's a time killer.
But you're not actually going to, try to eat the little planes.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, there you go.
Don't even want to lick them, actually.
Yeah. What do you got, Teresa?
I have things.
Do you? Do you have things?
Should we start the show?
Well, I don't know. Either that or a little more lively banter. It was a sudden stop, I think.
Yes.
We should not suddenly stop.
Ah.
And good morning, y'all. Here we are. This is now Bridge to a Better World. I'm Ani.
And I am Teresa Mitchell, and I have some headlines for today. And I want to start with...
I'm going to say today came early. That's all I'm going to say. It's like I feel like I'm not quite here yet.
Yes. Well, wherever you're at,
There you are.
That's where you are. Annette Carey writes in a Tri-City Herald. And when I start off with that, it's going to be bad news. The spill of highly radioactive waste beneath a building on the Hanford Nuclear Reservation north of Richland and near the Columbia River is both deeper and broader than anticipated. In a statement Thursday, the Department of Energy said the contamination in the soil at the Hanford 324 building, 1,000 feet from the Columbia River and a mile north of Richland, is much larger than previously identified. Now the Department of Energy is rethinking the cleanup plan for the spill discovered 13 years ago, with work crews making preparations for the
excavation. No time like the present.
Yeah, of the radioactive material over the past 6 years. Well, the stuff was probably spilled in the 50s. And they discovered it 13 years ago, which was just extra bad news. The spill of cesium and strontium in the soil beneath the 324 building is so radioactively hot that it would be lethal to a worker on direct contact within 2 minutes, the Department of Energy has said previously. Now, it's interesting that this is not big news because there's a couple of other places where you can die within 2 minutes of getting next to a radioactive source, and that would be in the basements of Chernobyl or Fukushima number 1. This is an extreme radioactive disaster, and it's pretty close to Portland. How far is Hanford from Portland?
Oh, it's close. Let's say close. It's Eastern Washington.
It's not far enough. Anyway, radioactivity in the contaminated soil.
I used to actually have the amount of miles in my head, but I don't anymore.
The cat is now on the keyboard.
Yes. We could go away disastrously at any time. We are perilously situated. Woo, with a cat.
All right. Oh, good job saving the day there.
I attempt.
Kitty cat, you cannot walk on the keyboard.
That was a bad button to press, kitty cat. Yeah. All right.
8,900 rads per hour. This is, one rad is, you should be concerned with a rad. 8,900, as I said, will cook you in a couple of minutes. The plan has been to leave the 324 building standing to act as a barrier to prevent precipitation from reaching the underground contamination and driving it closer to the groundwater.
166 miles.
Is not far enough.
It's not far enough.
I mean, imagine if you were 166 miles from Chernobyl, would you be worried about it? I think that you should worry. And you should worry about this.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is 1,000 feet from the Columbia. It is leaching towards the Columbia. And we have a government that doesn't like to admit this sort of thing, and we have a press that won't cover it. So this is news you're not supposed to know, indeed. I feel like just repeating or putting on a sign and walking downtown Portland, hello, did you know that there is a Chernobyl? Would you say 160 miles?
166.
166 miles from here, and it's leaking down the Columbia. The spill was recently found to be much larger than expected. The work began in 2017 to stabilize the building and the soil beneath it so that a remotely controlled excavator could be used within the building to dig up the highly contaminated soil beneath it. Now, I want to stop there and say, gee, I wonder why the excavator hasn't gone ahead and done that remotely controlled excavator. Well, if you remember from all the stories about Chernobyl and about Fukushima, you can't get that close to something that radioactive, even with equipment, because it dies. It stops working, and you can harden it and take it in there and create new machines, and there's a good chance that your machine will also die. And the only success that has been had in even just photographing things beneath Fukushima with that kind of radiation is using robots that partly use hydraulics.
And there have been a number, I'm just going to go ahead and put it out there. There have been a number of people, activists, community organizers over the years that have focused on Hanford. Hanford Watch was a very active thing 30 years ago. Paige Knight and Mamie German over the years have all had a turn in the seat of organizers trying to galvanize attention, awareness, and support to clean up. And tireless efforts they put in, and still we have Hanford, and it goes on. The people who are, near as I can figure, actively working on Hanford and being aware that it is there and urging cleanups are the Columbia River Keepers. Just putting it out there.
And it is the main driving industry in the Tri-Cities area. Dosimeters are common, and the official attitude, which you will hear if you talk to people from there, is most likely something along the lines of, I won't hurt you. Because that's how propagandized we are. So, speaking of disasters, in conversation.com, glaciologist is quoted saying that ice sheets are littered with millions of tiny hairline cracks in Greenland. They just went there and found this out. They are forced open by the meltwater from the rivers and streams that intercept them. This is a new driver of the breakup of the Greenland ice sheets that has just been discovered. Because glacier ice is so brittle at the surface, such cracks, they write, are ubiquitous across the melt zones of all glaciers, ice sheets, and ice shelves, yet because they're so tiny, they can't be detected by satellite remote sensing. We might just want to change this to the pet hour. Because Neo's here. Anyway, under most conditions, we find that stream-fed hydrofracture like this allows water to penetrate hundreds of meters down before the freezing close without the cracks necessarily penetrating to the bed to form a full-fledged moulin. This is a moulin that is not rouge, but even these partial depth hydrofractures have considerable impact on ice sheet stability. As the water pours in, it damages the ice sheet structure and releases its latent heat. The ice fabric warms and softens and hence flows and melts faster, just like warmed up candle wax, which is, I think, kind of a pleasant comparison there. Over the past 2 decades that scientists have tracked ice sheet melt and flow in earnest, melt events have become more common. And cutting to the chase, here we go. Increasing warming ocean currents are intruding into the Antarctic and Greenland coastlines, flowing under the ice shelves to undercut outlet glaciers and destabilize their calving fronts. Increasing rainfall across the Greenland ice sheet not only depletes snow accumulation, it accelerates surface melt and ice flow. Algae and microbes, along with surface snowpack melt, darken the ice sheet surface, absorbing more solar radiation, which also accelerates the ice melt. And I might add, the soot from fires is also darkening the ice sheet. That's about albedo, as they say. Superimposed ice slabs within the snowpack are forming across the accumulation zone, forming an impermeable barrier that depletes meltwater retention and drives extraordinary runoff. Water at the base of the ice sheet thaws and softens the frozen bed, thereby triggering basal sliding and accelerating interior ice sheet flow to the margins. And all of this seems to be hinting, speaking as someone who has commented on this for decades now, all of this is an acceleration in the acceleration, and it points to catastrophic events coming soon, the nature of which I can't exactly define, but which might come to very surprising, shocking, and catastrophic calving events, which might include miles of ice sliding into the ocean at once. Because one of the other big news items from Greenland is that soil samples that were dug from underneath the ice sheet by Project Nuke the Russians from Greenland. What was the name of that project? In the 1960s. Let me explain. In the 1960s, The U.S. government sneakily went into, not from Iceland, from Greenland, went into Greenland, into northern Greenland, and dug holes into the ice and made a vast cavern and brought in a nuclear reactor, which is still there, deep under the ice. And they did ice cores at the time, didn't have the technology to fully examine the ice cores, but they made the ice cores and they kept them frozen. And I think they had them in Denmark, which has sovereignty over Greenland, more or less. And anyway, they've recently been examined. And what they found was that there was tundra under there hundreds of thousands of years ago. And the nature of the tundra showed that the ice had suddenly melted off all the way down to the ground. So now we know, on top of all this stuff I just related to, that yes, the ice can all go away, all of it. Okay, so let's talk about Yevgeny Prigozhin from CNN. If you're wondering where Yevgeny Prigozhin is, you could go into Belarus, I suppose, or maybe Moscow and shout, Yevgeny, Yevgeny, because you'd have as good a chance as I did looking on the web. CNN writes, nobody knows where he is. Yevgeny Prigozhin was last spotted leaving the southern Russian city of Rostov-on-Don Saturday after abruptly calling off his troops' march on Moscow. So as I was saying on the Twitter teaser, where is he and how many pieces is he in? He released an audio message Monday explaining his decision to turn his troops back. The Kremlin and Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko claimed on Saturday that Prigozhin agreed to leave Russia for Belarus. Lukashenko said he brokered a deal that would see Prigozhin exiled into Belarus without facing criminal charges. According to Lukashenko, the Wagner chief arrived in Belarus Tuesday. While there are no videos or photos showing Prigozhin in Belarus, satellite imagery of an airbase outside Minsk showed two planes linked to Prigozhin landed there on Tuesday morning. As for Sergei Surovikin, the commander of the Russian Air Force, who's associated with Prigozhin, he has not been seen in public since overnight on Friday, when he issued a video. So, yeah, it seems that much of the narrative we've been getting about Prigozhin is bullshit. And who knows where Surovikin is. And, you know, bets are on that Putin is consolidating his power, which is to say he's currently murdering people, as is his wont. Now, I want to pass on a little bit of analysis from, of all people, the Brookings Institution. The Brookings Institution being, of course, the imperial excuse box for decades. And I would not trust them for a great many topics. I won't say I quite exactly trust them on this, but this is the sort of thing that they know how to do well, which is to examine the Russians and try to figure out what the heck they're doing. Not all that good, because whereas their connections to the CIA are good and to other spy agencies, my understanding is that the spy agencies haven't kept up and haven't bothered with their on-the-ground Russian and for that matter, Chinese language spying efforts. But they have a list of their analysts going in alphabetical order on their website, and you may want to look it up. It starts with Asli Tasbash, who has A's in his name and gets to go first. But what he says is basically echoed by the other essayists, and he writes, much of the media analysis after this weekend's 23-hour Wagner rebellion, I'll try that again, 23-hour Wagner rebellion, is about the weakness of Russian President Vladimir Putin's regime. They write, personalized autocracies bypass rules and institutions, and as such are inherently weaker than democracies, but autocrats are also more dangerous precisely for the same reason, especially when they feel their survival is at stake. Now I got you'll notice that Brookings just kind of slid past the idea that we're talking about or from a democracy rather than an oligarchy with democratic aspects. But anyway, it's wrong to assume that the Russian military is toothless or that the Prigozhin saga is the beginning of the end for Putin. Putin was humiliated, and as Wagner leader Yevgeny Prigozhin argues, the Russian military is corrupt and inefficient, but there's no indication that the regime is unraveling. We do not have a clear sense of what really happened. Was Prigozhin trying to stage a coup, as earlier reports suggested, or was this simply infighting among warlords in an opaque system? Most likely the latter. I'm not sure I agree. I mean, he got within couple hundred kilometers of Moscow. That looked like a coup to me. Um, Shooting down helicopters on the way. So, but okay, these are the Brookings Institute people, and they say the Wagner chief never really publicly criticized Putin throughout this episode, and always said his feud was with the military leadership, namely Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and Chief of the General Staff Valery Gerasimov. Um, Prigozhin may have set up the regime to go on a drunken rage, or it may just assumed after months of ranting publicly that Putin too agrees with his criticism of the army. In the end, Russian elites did not come to his support. And if you're wondering why they said drunken rage, that was very much an aspect of videos that Prigozhin put out pretty much constantly. He was often drunk. The impact
and definitely raging.
Yeah, kind of reminds me of Boris Yeltsin, who the National Endowment of Democracy funded to the tunes of millions of dollars, and whose chief lieutenant was one Vladimir Putin. The impact of the mini rebellion, they write, on the Ukraine war might also work in both ways. While many assume that with the Russian military embroiled in infighting, the Ukrainians can now find openings to reclaim more territory, a humiliated Putin would likely get more belligerent in order not to be perceived as weak. And they point out that after a failed coup attempt in Turkey, Ankara waged a massive incursion into Syria, in part for the same reason, pointing out that dictators kind of do that thing. So, as you can see from the analysis and the comparisons to other events in history, they don't have the on-the-ground intel, and they just really don't know. But there you have it. That's everyone's best guess as to what the heck is going on in Russia, and it is destabilizing. In my opinion, it was a coup attempt. But who am I? I barely speak 40 words of Russian. I bet I'd have a hard time finding 40 words. So I don't know.
But there you are.
Here we have it. It's a mystery.
Meanwhile, do you have more? Because I want to pivot.
Let's pivot. I could go on and on about the Wagner coup, but as I said, it is speculation. How much of it repeats what I just said?
Yeah. Because who knows? We don't know. But it is a very interesting thing to see go down in real time. The fact that dude was able to get within 120 miles of Moscow without really opposition is astonishing to me. And initially I thought, oh, well, they're in on it together. It's some sort of very weird psyop, with everything planned between the two. I'm not so sure about that anymore. It could just be that, in fact, Russia is extraordinarily overextended in its military deployment and doesn't have a whole lot to defend, the homeland, as it were, with all of their troops committing offensive acts on the borders and in Ukraine. It's a fascinating world, isn't it? So you are watching. This is now Bridge to a Better World. We sure are hoping we see a better world evolve from our efforts, from our time and energy spent recreating it, because the Supreme Court has been on a tear this week. And I'm just going to put it out there that there have been some decisions that have been interesting and good. The decision to allow suits to move forward against corporate rule if the corporation does business in Pennsylvania, then you can sue. And that's a fascinating decision. I'm not explaining that one very well, but that one's interesting to me. Going to the ones that are, let's say, less good, let's say terrible. They have struck down affirmative action this week. That's decades of precedent struck down on affirmative action. They struck down Biden's student debt loan relief, and they have upheld bigotry against the LGBTQ communities. In her dissent, Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote that today, the court, for the first time in its history, grants a business open to the public a constitutional right to refuse service to members of a protected class. And I'm just going to read a little bit about that decision. And that would be in a major blow to LGBTQ plus rights, the U.S. Supreme Court on Friday sided with an evangelical Christian web designer who refuses to provide services for same-sex wedding despite a law banning discrimination against gay people. In the 6-3 ruling, guess how that broke down? 6-3 ruling. We see a lot of that this week. In the 6-3 ruling in 303 Creative LLC versus Elenis, the High Court's right-wing majority opened the door for businesses to discriminate in the name of free speech. I always love that free speech means, folks can't discriminate against us. That's freedom. The court ruled that Colorado's anti-discrimination law violates web designer Lori Smith's First Amendment right to free speech by compelling her to create wedding websites for same-sex couples, even though no same-sex couple ever sought her services. Smith challenged the statute because it contradicts her religious beliefs. So no one actually tried to get this bigot
She didn't have
to
standing.
make a website, but she wanted to challenge the law because maybe it made her uncomfortable.
That's how corrupt they become. I mean,
Yeah.
this case should have been thrown out when they found this out. She did not have standing. This did not personally affect her.
So, Gorsuch writes for the majority, the First Amendment envisions the United States as a rich and complex place where all persons are free to think and speak as they wish, not as the government demands. Isn't that sweet? Thanks, Gorsuch. Fuck off. In her dissent, Justice Sotomayor, who joined with Elena Kagan and Ketanji Brown Jackson, wrote that today the court, for the first time in history, grants a business open to the public a constitutional right to refuse to serve members of a protected class. So there's that one. So sorry, excuse me. Also, the court struck down debt relief, and that is affecting the lives of millions of people as well. Really the three blows of striking down, services to protected class, to the LGBTQ plus communities, striking down affirmative action, and striking down debt relief. It's been a hell of a week legally. And it is, I'm going to say, really time to get seriously organized around our rights. It is well past time to demand and organize and become more effective, because we have to do something. Around the Supreme Court, it's the highest court. There is no court of appeals past this, right? So now this is the law of the land. These three cases are devastating. And so what do we do around the Supreme Court? Is it, in fact, time to organize for a Supreme Court restructuring, since, in fact, it's been packed with bigots by design? We were talking about expanding the court and how soon that conversation died out, right? Do we expand the court? What do we do? What is the solution at this point when we have 6 conservatives is not even really cutting it? Some of them outright fascists, certainly misogynist, certainly bigots, and certainly corrupt by all the scandals coming out around their secret funders. I'm going to go ahead and put it out there that the scandals are involving the conservative judges, not all of them, but a lot of them. And they haven't really touched Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson. And I just think that that's rather striking in and of itself.
Well, I have to agree. This is bigotry. It's very clearly bigotry. The plaintiff is saying that her sense of bigotry, as a religious person, was offended by gayness. I mean, just think about that. She's saying that as a Christian, and this is ridiculous internally and on its face, she's offended by gayness. Now, the only things that
I'm
Christians
offended
can
by
point to,
Christians, but
I know, even in the Bible, there are only some vague statements by St. Paul about gayness, and they are vague. And there are vicious statements against gay people, which originated from the war on the Canaanites, the Joshua War in the Old Testament. But if you're a Christian, that means that you obey Christ's injunction, not to obey the old law, but to obey the new covenant, which I'm not going to say here, but I was brought up Christian, as you can tell, and it's love thy neighbor, etc. And it's not hate the gays. And so even internally, religiously, this woman would not have been able to make a good case that she was required by her God to hate gays. She isn't. She's just a bigot. And her bigotry is offended.
And she may be required by her pastor to hate gays, but her pastor is also a bigot, right? I mean, that's sort of the whole thing. It's like, well, my pastor said.
So the Supreme Court is shoving the nation farther and farther into fascism. I mean, bigotry is protected. Money is free speech. The results of these attitudes, statements, and effective laws are increasing our oppression day by day. So we do have to do something at the very minimum about the Supreme Court. And of course, I'm a revolutionist, and so I want things to go a lot further than that. But yeah, the Supreme Court is on our necks, and we'll stay there. We'll stay there until we have the nerve and the organization to put it down.
And how do we do that? Yes, in fact, John, I agree. First, take control of Congress and keep the White House. And in keeping the White House, we need to actually have the White House populated by people with a firm backbone. Yeah, because I don't see it. Biden talks a fair game at times, occasionally, and then seems to want to backpedal and shake hands across aisles and do things to bring unity somehow with a bunch of bigots who, want to return America to, let's just say, a previous century. We're not sure which century yet. Right. Anything else from you?
That's it from me.
There's so much. There is just so much to say. But it is now, we are in summer. We have crossed over in the summer solstice timeline. And so these are the days where we really kind of need to soak up all of the energy to keep us active and activated. Summer is a very engaged time. And with that, the cards I pulled for today say that it's in fact time to engage your own subconscious self. We have the full moon coming up on Monday. And it is the cards. Yes, they were all inversed this morning. The moon, the 8 of Cups, and the 8 of Wands.
Do you think is that like a reflection of the Supreme Court that they're all inversed?
No. But it does tend to mean that it's hard to take a lot of forward action right now. It's things are a little convoluted. And with the moon, the 8 of Cups, and the 8 of Wands, it's a big ol' call to go deep within yourself, to be in touch with your own psychic awareness, your intuitive self, your subconscious, and to make sure that you are working in concert with yourself. You're not working against your own best interests. A lot of times we have sort of inner conflicts, and it causes us to not be clear in our actions. So get very clear in your mind, in your subconscious self. Be in agreement with yourself, right? And take a step back and be clear. This is a good time to, in fact, absorb the psychic energy from the full moon, and to take a little time away to get to know yourself a little bit better right now before we move ahead, before we plunge headlong into the action that the summer may bring us. It's a call to conserve your energy. stock it up right now and conserve it, because we're going to need each other. We're going to need all of that clear thought and clear vision, as we move forward into the future. But right now, take a little time away, and uh, it's a good time for meditation. It's a good time for becoming clear in thought and feeling, becoming clear in heart and thought. All right, that's what I got. Open to psychic awareness, soak up all that energy, and take a little downtime right now to become very clear and focused.
All right, then.
Yeah. So with that,
I think we should wrap it up. I'm going to take a little downtime to
okay.
take a shower.
All right. Well, please do subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks to the folks who have subscribed. We have grown in our subscribers in the last couple of weeks, and that's always encouraging. So please do pass the link around. And if you'd like to contact us, leave a comment below, and we're always happy to hear from you. We also are around the Twitterverse. You can find us there. Bridge #2 Utopia is the Twitter account for this show. What else can you do? Well, you know how to find us. Comment below and hit the notification button, and we'll see you in a week.
I'm at Press Watch Now on Twitter. And our love goes out to you and to all the ships at sea. Bye.